Well, it is 12 o'clock on the dot, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to those of you who have joined us. This is the second of 5 sessions that we are hosting, all about preparing for the next steps. And I am so glad that you have joined us. A few reminders about the webinar specifically. If you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A section and I will answer those at the end. Also, I'm not sure what device you are watching or listening from, but you should be able to move me around on the screen so that you can see the slides as I will be sharing some today. So feel free to play around with that and move me completely out of the way if necessary. And additionally, this session, along with all of the other sessions, will be available on YouTube from our school's website, WCCS.org. You can scroll to the bottom of the homepage and there's a YouTube link there. Last week's session is already posted, so feel free to rewatch that or watch it if you weren't able to join us, and share it with friends that you think might benefit from the information. And today's session will be just that same availability there on YouTube, and all the other sessions will be in the coming weeks. So again, thank you for all who are joining now. I am so excited to talk about today making plans for after high school, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the session slides. All right, so hopefully you can see that now. I am so excited to talk about this because it's my main part of my job here at Westminster Catawba as college and career counselor is helping students think about what's after high school. And as we consider making plans for after high school, we have to talk about first those 4 very short years of high school. And that's what I'll be focusing on today is how do students build a portfolio, build a successful foundation so that they can have post-secondary success. Today, we're going to talk about the things that you see here on the screen. We're going to give some time to each of these. But making the most of high school involves all of this. And I think that if students can get a grasp on these things, then the appropriate doors will be open to them after high school, no matter what their plans might be. To begin, we're going to talk about study habits and time management. As far as study habits go, something that I see often in the transition, especially from middle to high school, is this idea that things might need to change as far as how students study. The subjects obviously will be changing, but maybe the way a student has always been able to grasp material in elementary and middle school, suddenly that same strategy isn't working for them. So often what I see in high school is a necessity to be flexible in how they study. I think it's important for students to approach different assessments with different study strategies. And I often tell students, if you continue to approach assessments the same way every time, expecting a different result, a better result, that's just silly. So we have to be able to be flexible and change up those strategies as we approach assignments for teachers and assessments, maybe even the way we write papers. Maybe in middle school, students are able to just kind of get their thoughts out on paper and put those in paragraph form and turn it in. But in high school, we want to see more of the writing process. So flexibility is very necessary as they make that transition into high school. Consistency is also really important. So I don't know how many of you would say that you are procrastinators. We'll talk about that with time management. But what I find with studying specifically, cramming doesn't really always work. Hardly ever works for me, but I think that consistent studying, consistent work on projects along the way alleviates stress for students. And so in high school, it's important to develop that consistency skill and approach their homework, approach their assignments, approach their day-to-day coursework consistently and giving it their best. And then in addition, when every study strategy they try might not work, maybe they're struggling in an area, they should definitely talk to the experts. And in this case, it's going to be our teachers. Whatever the teacher is for that subject, students should be able to go to that teacher and ask for help. As the experts in their field, they will likely have very good study strategies that match that content area. And so I encourage students all the time from the beginning of high school all the way through to make those connections. And we'll talk about relationship building in just a moment. But certainly when preparing for assignments and assessments, we should definitely talk to the experts as much as we can so that they can help us be successful. Time management. So again, I've already mentioned cramming, it doesn't really always work, but I wrote here, procrastination progresses. And what I mean by that is it grows. Some of us may be procrastinators in our adult life and talk about stress that comes along with that. And so students, it would be in their best interest to learn to manage their time wisely as they are preparing for a paper. They usually will know the deadline weeks in advance. And so if they work on it consistently, as we've talked about, and not put it off, even the most difficult of assignments, I think that will alleviate stress for students. In addition, it's important for students to think about, as we talked about last week, their gifts and talents and their passions, and they need to spend time on those things. One of the best ways they can do this, and what I like to see, is when high school students serve in an area where they're passionate. I'll give you a couple of examples that our students have done. Those that are really passionate about animals, maybe even potentially wanting to become a veterinarian or a vet tech in the future, they will often volunteer at animal shelters. So not only are they earning service hours for their portfolio, but they are giving time, quality time, to what they think God has gifted them with, or what their skills are, so that they can develop in those areas. And it benefits them and it builds that portfolio. Another example is those that may be able to work in the hospitals as a candy striper, maybe those who are thinking of nursing or pre-medical school and things like that. If a student can find where they're passionate and figure out ways in which they can serve in that area, it will help them continue to develop that passion, but it will also build that portfolio, which we're going to talk about as a whole in just a second. Lastly, with regard to time management, one thing that high school students will start to do is ask for recommendations. Particularly in the junior and senior year, students may ask for recommendations for employment, for college acceptance, and or scholarship purposes. And so we have to be able to teach our students professional courtesy and requests. I like to tell our students to give at least a 2-week turnaround time for making requests, but in general, they can begin practicing this even in middle school, just giving that professional courtesy when asking a teacher to look over a quiz with them, to grade a paper. I hear students all the time in the hallway say, "Did you grade our test yet?" And so while we like that enthusiasm, we have to help our students understand that they are working with adults, and developing that sense of professionalism will be very helpful to them, not only now, but in the future as they continue to work with new adults. So speaking of working with adults and new people, building relationships is one of the most important parts of being successful in high school and after high school. With regards to relationships within the school setting, we're talking about here teachers, coaches, support staff like myself. It is important that students build effective relationships with good communication, where they are honest with each other, and they have to be able to accept constructive criticism. Along the way, high school is a time of growth, right? And so we know that we might need to redirect students or encourage them to get out of their comfort zone in some way. And so that is an effective relationship when a student can approach an adult and say what they need, and be willing to heed that advice that might come. This will happen throughout high school. Whether or not students want to, they will be building relationships, and we want them to be healthy, effective, good relationships. But certainly they're building relationships even if it's a negative one. And so we want to encourage our students to build good relationships with effective communication and honesty. Now, why is building these relationships important? Well, first and foremost, we know that God has designed us for community. I encourage students, not only in their school life, but in their home life. The people around us, we often identify them with what they can do for us. But as believers, we need to recognize that those around us are image bearers of Christ. They are human beings. They're sons and daughters, women and men, long before they might be our mom or dad or teacher. And so, first of all, building good relationships is a way to honor God and his design for community. In addition to that, in building relationships specifically within the school with teachers, coaches, and staff, it's important because these people will be helping our students with coursework, potentially with recruitment, with scholarships, and these are future recommenders. So I tell students all the time, the person you have for history in 9th grade might very well be the one that you need to ask 3 years later for a recommendation. And so the bridges we want to be building right now so that later on, if a recommendation is requested, then they have lots of good stuff to put in that recommendation to help the student get to the next level. And so this idea of building relationships is important. Building rapport is necessary. And we want our students to be practicing that now, knowing that even in our adult life, we continue networking, building rapport in our own jobs and lives outside of work even. And it's a necessary part of growth. And so we want our students to practice that in a school setting where it's safe and they can have a little bit more grace to work through that. Another part that we have to talk about when we think about being successful in high school has to do with grades. Grades are sometimes all that students want to focus on, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but it is necessary to discuss because we know that most of the next steps after high school want to know about those grades in high school. So Westminster Catawba Christian School and many of our area high schools use the South Carolina Uniform Grading Policy. This is actually the same for our state. And we know that grades accumulate over 4 years. And so maybe students come in with a couple of credits from 8th grade. Those can potentially be placed on the transcript to begin that GPA. And then over 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, students are building what we call a cumulative grade point average, GPA. And this GPA is what colleges and universities want to see. Scholarship options often ask for this, and even at the college level, but also outside scholarships, employers may potentially ask for this. So the GPA plays an important role in being successful after high school. I want to caution you all here, and I often caution our students here as well, that grades are just one part of a student's portfolio. So a college, for example, may ask for that GPA, will certainly ask for it, but they're also going to ask about service, leadership, and other extracurricular activities. And so while we want students to think of grades in an appropriate way, we don't want them to let that be the only thing they think about. And as you see in the next statement here, we definitely don't want them to find their identity in grades alone. I've seen this play out in my 9 years here. Students who are finding all of their purpose and identity in their grades or their academic success do experience a great amount of stress. And that's not healthy. Right? We want them to know that their identity is in Jesus, God as their creator, and they are much more than an A or a B or a C or a D or an F. They are much more than that. Another thing that I like to encourage students on is this idea of my best is different from your best. And so while we are accumulating our grades over time, students should not compare themselves to the next person. The best that they put forth is going to be different than their neighbors. And so they need to focus on putting their best foot forward. And if that looks different than the next person's, that's okay, because God designed them differently and has different plans for them in the future. I heard a pastor say once in a sermon, I can't handle another person's blessing. And so if I'm constantly comparing myself to another, wishing for what they had, well, God hasn't designed me potentially for what they have. And to have it, well, I'm not equipped to have it, and I wouldn't be content there anyway. So students should be encouraged to put forth that best effort and realize that comparison is unnecessary because their best is different from each person in the room. Another thing with regard to grades and coursework is picking appropriately challenging coursework. So for our students here at Westminster, we have course selection seasons, and faculty and staff are available to meet with students to talk about what classes should be next in that high school curriculum. And a lot of them are traditionally, you're going to take an English and a math and a science and a social studies and Bible here. But what about the electives? Are there electives that connect with what they're passionate about? What would be something that would challenge them appropriately, where they'd be stretched a little bit with regard to course rigor? So we want to individualize that for each student. And the high school coursework, as they're accumulating grades, should be a reflection, yes, of earning that high school diploma, but also what their talents, gifts, interests, skills are. And here at Westminster, we are able to offer a wide range of electives, even online opportunities we've utilized in the past, because we really do believe that coursework should be individualized as much as it possibly can when it comes to electives. We want students to be pursuing their interests. We've had students take photography, personal finance, and accounting as they're considering future plans. And I think it's good to explore that now in high school before they get into a college curriculum and realize, ooh, this isn't for me, and maybe they've wasted a semester or a year. So some of the electives that we offer at Westminster, you can see on the screen. The cool thing about this is we try to, and I'll shout out Dr. Furrow here, he kind of puts his ear to the ground for our students to see what their interests are, and he connects with faculty and staff to see who is equipped to teach particular electives that cater to the needs of our students. I am blessed to be able to teach Intro to Education for students who are interested in career and education in the future. We have digital multimedia, we have choir chimes, so a wide range of electives are available. For students who do not attend Westminster, this is still something to consider. What coursework is out there and available to connect to the interests and skills of your kids? This is important as we consider building a portfolio that is well-rounded. I'd also like to give you a glimpse of the grading scale that I referenced earlier, because I want to talk about something when it comes to cumulative GPA. So sometimes students in high school think, I need to take all the honors classes and all the advanced placement classes or I won't get into college. And this is a myth. So when I talk about choosing appropriately challenging coursework, we have to recall that my best is different than your best. So appropriately challenging coursework is going to look different for students along the way. And with regard to the South Carolina Uniform Grading Scale, you can even see here that potentially a student in a college preparatory class can earn up to a 5.0 for a 100 in that class. And that is comparable to what we see with honors and AP along the way in the B range. So yes, we want to think about that GPA accumulation, but we really want to pick coursework that's appropriate for students where they are challenged, but not to the point of feeling that like they're constantly failing. We want them to be challenged appropriately while feeling that success along the way and creating that good foundation of a cumulative GPA to show to those recruiters or to those college admissions officers or future employers. So I keep talking about building a portfolio, and essentially students should look at high school as a portfolio building time, right? They have 4 years to build this portfolio, this who am I, that they will show to that next steps committee, that college admissions recruiter, that coach at the collegiate level, the scholarship committee, and I kind of look at a portfolio in 4 categories. One is the academics, and we've talked about that. This is grades, standardized test scores, which we're going to have a different session on, and class rank, which is usually associated with the GPA if the rank is available. Some schools do not rank, and that's okay. But that's the bubble of academics. And then there are the extracurricular activities. What's going on when students aren't in the classroom? A couple of things to consider here. We want to consider quality over quantity. I have heard admissions counselors say for the last 9 years, it doesn't matter if a student has served in 25 places for 1 hour each time. But it matters more if a student gives 25 hours of his or her time to the same organization because it's what they're passionate about. So we really want to keep this in the front of our minds, quality versus quantity. The other thing to consider, like what we've talked about before, is there a connection to the gifts and talents and passions for these students as they pick their extracurricular activities? This can include church involvement, service, leadership, and athletics. And so a well-rounded student has extracurricular activities. In addition, a good portfolio may have some honors and awards there. This is the smallest honor and award to those larger ones. One of the things that can go into this category are opportunities for summer conferences. For example, some of our students are able to attend leadership conferences in 9th, 10th, and 11th grades. And it's all application based where they're selected. And so if a student attends such a conference, or right now they're all virtual, but they put that on their resume, on that portfolio, and it continues to build along the way. Another thing that is true to me and I hold very dearly is an after-school job for high school students. I worked during my high school career, and it taught me a lot. And while I worked, I was not able to do some of the other extracurricular activities that some high school students, peers of mine, were doing. But what was really neat was when I started to apply to colleges, they recognized that employment, I was spending quality time earning money, keeping my budget balanced, and that takes a lot of responsibility. And so we want to think about that. Would it be a consideration for your child to potentially have an after-school job to learn some of that responsibility along the way? And that is also something to showcase in that portfolio for a high school student. A couple of things that you see here in these very weird shapes on the side, but something that I think is super important. In the portfolio building process, students are going to create, I can't tell you how many different logins. They may have a login for their SAT and another one for their ACT, another one for their college admissions applications, another one for the NCAA. And so what I have found over the years, students should make a habit of writing down their usernames and passwords. I used to give out a sheet of paper for students to do this, and one year a student said, Mrs. Sapp, you know, we can just put that into our phones. So yes, please make a habit of writing down these usernames and passwords, because it does create some bit of stress when we can't get logged in to check a score or to send a score somewhere or to check an admission status. Can you imagine that? So part of this portfolio building process is to keep track of those login credentials and keeping that somewhere safe. The other thing is keeping track in general is very important. So something that oftentimes will happen when I'm helping a student with a college application, let's say, suddenly they are tasked with remembering everything they've done since ninth grade in service. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember half of what happened last week. So it's important for our students to keep track of what they are accomplishing along the way. And there's lots of different avenues to do this. Some of my students just keep a spreadsheet and they do a page for ninth grade, and each time they serve, they add that to the list. Where did they serve, when, and how many hours? If they get honor roll or another kind of award, they put that in there as well. And so then, as they've kept track all this time, then when they get ready to fill out that employment application or scholarship or college admissions application, they have that running record available to them. And inevitably, if they don't keep track, we're probably going to miss something. And that something could be what sets them apart as they are being considered for an admissions spot at a college or for a scholarship. One of the ways that our students are able to keep track and to build a resume is through a resource called Tallo. But certainly our students can do it like we did it and create a Word document and start building that resume. If you're interested in a resume template, feel free to email me. My contact information will be at the end. I'd love to share a template of how to get started with building that resume for high school students. It'll be slightly different than what you and I would create for a job. So feel free to email me with that request and I'd be happy to send that to you. At Westminster, we also have the South Carolina Career Information System for students beginning in 6th grade. And this will allow them to kind of think about those gifts and talents and passions and ways in which they could potentially serve in those areas, find leadership opportunities in those areas. So we have some resources here, but certainly for any student, Westminster or not, becoming a well-rounded student is essential, and these are the categories that we kind of think about. With regard to athletics, for any students who are interested in playing at the collegiate level, one of the things to keep track of along the way are those athletic stats, growth along 4 years, keeping up with video and film, keeping up with the coaches that may reach out to students. Sometimes that can be overwhelming trying to keep up with every college that may be pursuing a student athlete. And so keeping track along the way with regard to athletic recruitment will make the process a bit simpler. So let's talk about our resources. So along the way, students should be using as many resources as they possibly can in order to settle that foundation so they could be successful after high school. Some of the resources, of course, will be the school faculty and staff wherever they're attending. The teachers with regard to being successful in the classroom, maybe they offer help sessions or individual meetings. The athletic director and coaches will definitely be helpful in the athletic recruitment process. School counselors like myself, they can host group sessions. Certainly at Westminster, we are small enough where I can have individual meetings with all of our students as they need and kind of help build that four-year portfolio over time. I did mention Tallo is a great resume builder. This is a partnership with Westminster as well as the South Carolina Career Information System. If you don't have access to those two things, you can certainly Google other options to build a resume. But again, feel free to reach out to me. I'll send you a template for a Word document as well. And then for the exploring your interests, there's lots of interest inventories out there on the web. So you can certainly, just as a starting point, search for quizzes, just fun little interest inventory quizzes to see, okay, what career cluster do I fall into and what jobs could I encourage my students, my kids to explore further. And the earlier we explore, I think it's less stress that way, and it's a little bit more fun. There's more pressure in that junior and senior year in particular to suddenly decide, wait, I have to know what I want to be when I grow up. But if we are exploring along the way, then maybe they have a little bit better of an idea when they reach those years where we now need to start making plans for after high school. I have to say, Hi to Mrs. Polston, who does our e-news. So at Westminster, we have an e-news that goes out every other week, I believe. But it has information about leadership opportunities like I talked about before. Sometimes there's scholarship opportunities there, but that is a great resource for our Westminster students to make sure they're reading that thoroughly to see what opportunities are happening, particularly outside of the classroom. And then email. So students say this all the time. I never read my emails. And when you go into high school and over the next 4 years, that's something that we want to change. We want them to read every email they ever get. I tell students all the time, I have the best email at Westminster because mine is ASAP. And that is an important email. So if they ever get something from me, read it, read it, read it. But email in general is a way that admissions counselors connect with students, coaches connect with student athletes. And so this is a habit that they need to develop, is checking the email consistently, using one that's identifiable. I will say that in building a portfolio, a funny email is not the email we want to list on the resume. We want something that identifies first and last name, year of birth, something simple so that the receiver knows exactly who it is. And then they need to check those emails regularly. In addition, for our juniors and seniors here at Westminster, I do want to remind families that they have a class page in the family portal where I post scholarships, college visit information, deadlines for SAT and ACT. That's constantly posted there for our students to be able to see what's coming up. So I've asked those juniors and seniors, check that once a week so that you're always in the know. But in general, our resources, there are plenty available to us. And when in doubt, we need to ask the experts, ask questions of those who may have gone through the process before. Maybe you have a mom friend who has older kids, but we need to use as many resources as we possibly can. And I would love to be one of those for you all along the way. Okay, so now we have a plan. We're successful in high school, but what happens after high school? So there's lots of avenues that students can choose for after high school. And the ones that you see here are ones that our graduates have pursued after high school. The most popular pursuit is college or university. And I do want to brag on the 9 years worth of students I've been blessed to work with. They have been accepted to over 100 colleges and universities since 2012, with 22 states represented and even 2 international acceptances. So I'm really proud of those classes that I've been able to work with, and God has done a tremendous work here at Westminster. College and university, like I said, is very popular, at least here at Westminster. There are 2-year options available, 4-year options available, and trade school options available. One of the cool things about the trade school option, if your child develops an interest or passion in a trade, there's often the technical colleges that you can connect with, and businesses partner with those technical colleges, and your child may be looking at getting a degree while working for a company that has that particular trade available. And so you always want to be on the lookout for those partnerships with regard to going to college and getting a degree while also waiting for that employment opportunity right after graduation. Military is also another option. There's several branches to choose from. We do have alumni who have either served or are currently serving in multiple branches. The military recruitment offices, most of them are actually available in the Rock Hill Galleria for South Carolina. So if you're interested in learning more about military recruitment, most of the branches are represented in the Rock Hill Galleria Mall. They will help you understand the recruitment process and also the ASVAB requirement, which is a standardized test that military recruits take in order to see where their specialization will lie. We also have had students who take gap years. So for us in particular, we have had students go through the National Outdoor Leadership School and the AIM World Race. Gap year programs are really cool if they go through an organization. Now, sometimes students will say, I just want to take a year off, which is why I've listed employment here. Maybe a student just wants to take a year to travel, perhaps, and work and save money so that they can afford college later on. But what I find is the gap year programs that are offered through an organization often will give students experiences that they may not be able to come up with on their own if they're taking a year off. So gap year options are definitely a cool option. Then we've had some students who take time to do mission work. We've had a student who graduated from high school and immediately went to China to the teacher's college, one of the teacher's colleges there. And he was able to share the gospel with those that he came into contact with while also taking some coursework. And then, of course, students are definitely able to go straight into a job after high school as well. So no matter the option that a student chooses from this list, the things that we've talked about today will help them in building a portfolio that they can confidently give to any of these options and be ready. It's important that students feel confident in those next steps after high school. And certainly it's important for our students to keep at the forefront that idea of purpose and calling as they're considering, what am I going to do after high school? So for today, what can you leave knowing that you can do right now? And one is to point our kids back to their purpose and calling. I've written here that without the Lord's leading, we always go the wrong direction. And so as our students are traveling through these 4 years of high school, what a beautiful time for them to be able to seek the Lord's will. As they're building that portfolio, I believe God wants to be part of the decision of what courses they take, what extracurricular activities they choose. He wants to be part of all of that decision making. And so as much as we can point our kids back to that idea of, let's pray over this, let's make sure we're doing something that God would want you to do, I think that's most important as we build that portfolio. The other thing to do is to encourage students to take ownership of their learning and exploration. One of the things that we as parents do and are tasked with, especially in the early years, is we have ownership, a lot of ownership over their learning. I don't know about you, but when my kindergartner or my second grader gets a school project, those lovely science projects perhaps, we're doing a lot of that work because they need us to. But as they grow into that high school time, we need to be able to start letting go of the reins a little bit, letting them speak to the teacher first before we call or email, letting them keep that agenda up to date. And I think part of this is letting them experience that failure when perhaps they haven't managed their time wisely or where they didn't change up those study habits. And so students need to take ownership of their learning in high school as a good practice for what they'll have to do after high school, right? In college, it's going to be them. It's going to be their degree and their potential job. And so we want them to have good practice now for the future. One thing that I want to mention here, especially for students who have learning disabilities, one of the things that I would encourage those students to do is to begin keeping up with their own available accommodations and ensuring that they're talking with their teachers ahead of time to receive those accommodations, because this is one of the things that they have to do in college. So professors will not keep up with whether or not a student received extended time on an assessment. It's the student's responsibility. So one thing that we encourage, especially our seniors here, in doing is keeping up with the available accommodations and ensuring that they're receiving those in their high school coursework as good practice for the future. So that's definitely part of that taking ownership. And another thing is to begin building that portfolio. Be consistent in adding to it. Even if you think something's not important, jot it down. And then when you get ready to maybe apply for college or apply for a scholarship, you can kind of filter through what you want to share. But certainly building a portfolio, keeping track of those accomplishments along the way is essential in being successful in high school and after. And then, of course, be excited. Students, the earlier they get started on this as a way just to explore, I think it's such an exciting time. And I think it's something that God wants us to be excited about. You know, if we talk about that purpose and calling again, He designed us to love Him and love others, and He's gifted us with some things, and that's really cool. And so I want our students to be excited about what God is doing in them and what He's equipping them to be able to do. And so I hope that is helpful to you. Now, with the time we have left, we have just a bit of time. I want to know if you have any questions, you can put that into the Q&A. Additionally, my contact information is on the screen here, so please do jot that down. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them individually if that's necessary for your family. And do remember, as those questions may be coming in, I'll go ahead and share that next week we're going to talk about standardized testing. Unlocking the secrets of standardized testing, which I'm not sure how many secrets I really know, but I do want to give you everything I know about standardized testing and how our students can be successful there. And as always, please do feel free to share this with friends that you think might benefit from the information. I'll pause for just a minute to see if any questions come in, and then I'll close in prayer. Thank you so much for joining today. I am so thankful for you and for your families, and we are happy to host you here at Westminster. So if you have any questions, now's the time. All right, let's close in prayer. And if you need anything individually, please give me a ring or an email. I'd be happy to help. Let's pray together. God, you are good to us. Lord, I say that all the time, but you are good all the time. And we thank you for your goodness and for your love and your grace and mercy. Lord, thank you for each family represented here today. I pray that you would bless them tremendously. Lord, would you bless our kids? God, challenge them to know you, to fall more in love with you, and to seek your will in all that they do. Let us be examples of that. Help us to model for our kids what it means to love you and to love others. God, would you grant success to the students represented here today and all of our students, God? Would you help them to be successful in high school so that they can be successful after high school? And Lord, we'll continue to point them to you, knowing that you are the giver of all good things. Lord, we love you. Thank you for loving us and being patient with us. In your name, amen. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you all have a lovely afternoon.